Okay, bueno, buenas noches. Saludos, everyone. My name is Giselle. I'm speaking today as a member of the Central Committee of Diaspora Pa'lante Collective. I want to welcome everyone for joining us virtually, and thank you so much for being here as we're going to be speaking about our annual brigade report back with this presentation. So in the chat, please feel free to share your name, affiliated organizations, and where you're based if you're not part of DPC. So, and throughout the report back, shall you have any questions, you're welcome to go on Stack, raise your virtual hands or drop any questions or comments in the chat. So, as many of you know, our brigade is an essential part of the work that we do as Boricuas and allies dedicated to the liberation of Puerto Rico. Each year, our collective organizes these brigades to build solidarity, deepen our political education, and strengthen the ties between the diaspora and the archipelago. So we hold these brigade report backs and share them publicly as a vital way for us to showcase the necessity of our work, to help other people understand what is it that we do, why we do it, and to bring more people into this type of movement. So DPC as a grassroots organization, we do rely heavily on member dues, fundraising, community donations to continue our work. So this space is really about building collective understanding and support for, the struggle that we have ahead. So myself, as well as several members who participated in this year's brigades, will be, sharing their reflections on what we did during our trip and the purpose and specific focus for this year's particular brigade, and some of our key activities, our outcomes, and most importantly, our lessons learned. And that way we're able to reflect what these experiences have taught us about our responsibilities as Boricuas in the diaspora. So again, thank you for being here. But before we dive into what we did during the brigade and our amazing highlights and our reflections, I do want to take a moment to share how we're able to make these annual brigades possible every year. So I lovingly put together what we call the Brigade FAQ, which answers some of the bigger questions on the who, what, where, when, why, and how. This just isn't for internal use, but for anyone who just wants generally a better understanding of the purpose of our brigades. And anyone who might be interested in organizing something similar with their own collective or organizations for other specifics are not included here, please feel free to ask us. So I'm going to go ahead and ask about the who. In case there are anyone here that's not part of Diaspora Pa'lante Collective and is new the first time being part of our something put on by our organization, we are DPC. We're an anti-imperialist organization committed to rebuilding a strong and vibrant movement for independence and socialism in Puerto Rico. We are equally dedicated to creating what we call a zone of peace across our Americas. And we do all of this by participating in community organizing, doing political education, and active participation in international campaigns that advance the liberation struggle. So when it comes to participating in these brigades, it's open to all members of Diaspora Pa'lante Collective. So each year we are working on gradually increasing the number of members who are able to join us as we're working towards making them as accessible as possible for as many of our members as possible. Okay, next on to the what. So every year we do travel with very specific objectives to ensure that our work is meaningful, it's intentional, and it's aligned with our mission. So our brigades help us strengthen the collective by deepening our understanding of the conditions that our people are facing, the realities of our land, and how we can better prepare ourselves for the fight and ultimately for our return. On to the where. So, I mean, obviously we're in Puerto Rico doing this work, but we're traveling across so many different municipalities depending on where our activities are taking place, as well as our meetings, who we're collaborating with. So we typically try to stay in a centralized location that makes commute across the archipelago as accessible as possible. On the slide, you're going to see a very little map. I wish we could zoom it in, but it showcases a lot of the different places that we visited in Puerto Rico, from the heart of Puerto Rico in Orocovis to all the way far east in Vieques and all the way to south, the most southern west point of the primary island of Puerto Rico, Cabo Rojo. We try to carry out these brigades once a year. The exact timing always varies. It really just depends on the availability of our partners, the organizations that we're trying to collaborate with and learn from, and the specific activities that we aim to complete. Very soon, you hear why we decided to complete this brigade mid to late September. And of course, the why. So we return to our homeland, whose indigenous name is Borinquen for many reasons. First, very importantly, we try to reconnect our own members of DPC to our land, our people, our culture, because this reconnection to our language that's only spoken in the way meant for Boricuas to understand our history, our shared struggle, all of this, what it does, it grounds us physically, it grounds us emotionally, politically, for some folks spiritually. It allows us to build genuine relationships with the organizations that we're meeting, that are doing the work on the ground. This connection also fuels our collective desire for return, for rematriation that's already been made possible by some of our members, and reminds us why the struggle is so important and why it matters to us so deeply. And finally, the how. So we're able to bring these brigades to life through careful planning throughout the year. As stated before, we are a grassroots organization, so we do rely on fundraising and donations. So when we're able to meet our fundraising goals, DPC, we're able to cover key costs such as accommodations, transportation around Puerto Rico, most meals, and then if possible, we're able to provide some support to the organizations that we're working with and learning from in the archipelago. Now I'd like to go ahead and pass the mic to our comrade Mateo.
Peace, comrades. So in terms of our objectives, by the way, my name is Mateo. I serve on DPC Central Committee. Giselle was really just touching on it. It's really important for us to connect with organizations that are our counterparts in the archipelago, that are actively involved on the ground in grassroots popular struggles for independence and socialism, okay? To gain a better understanding of the conditions that our people are enduring and how they are resisting, okay? We're really in a mad pursuit of strategic unity, okay? National unity. All this, the separation between us is imposed upon us, and it's intended to separate us in so many different ways, as Giselle said, physically, psychologically, politically, socially, and culturally. And so it's really important for us to actually get our feet on the ground and to be able to build with our people on the archipelago. So that's a really important primary objective of our brigades. We also want to provide opportunities for our members to get together and actually build their relationships with each other and develop some internal community so that we can actually build trust for the long-term struggle that we're all engaged in. DPC as a national organization, we do a lot, although not exclusively, but a lot of our work is done virtually, okay? Because we're so scattered across. We do have chapters that do a lot of in-person work, and they're building on the ground every single day and every single night. But for the most part, a lot of us have to be engaging in this virtual format, which has its advantages, but it also has its disadvantages. There's no substitute for meeting each other in person and being able to build and bond with each other in a direct way. And so being able to spend time with each other for a week, for 10 days, for 2 weeks, whatever we can do in the year, it really pays itself back tenfold in the long run. And so it's really important for us to be able to do that. And then also we are engaging in a reconnection with our cultural heritage, okay, reflecting and celebrating where our people come from and the cultural practices that have been developed through resistance, through the joy that we have felt living on such beautiful land for so many centuries. And again, we are diaspora. And so in many ways, we've been literally pulled from this land that our parents, our grandparents, our ancestors were blessed enough to actually be born into and have enjoyed, at least in part, in their lives. And so being able to reconnect with the land itself and being able to reconnect with our culture, and as Giselle said, our language, it's incredible. And so these brigades are really a multifaceted way for us to develop ourselves as human beings, as Puerto Ricans, as organizers, as revolutionaries. And so that really informs a lot of our core key objectives for our brigades. So for this this was our 4th brigade, actually, since our organization launched in the fall of 2022. And so for this brigade, we dedicated it to our freedom fighter, our martyr, our comrade Filiberto Ojeda Rios. And for those who don't know, Filiberto was a leader of Los Macheteros, okay, an armed clandestine organization in Puerto Rico that operated in the latter half of the 20th century. And on September 23rd, this reaches back to what Giselle was saying about why we chose this time to actually be down there. On September 23rd of 2005, Filiberto was assassinated by the FBI in his home in Hormiguero. September 23rd also marks the commemoration of El Grito de Lares, the 1868 revolt organized by Ramon Emeterio Betances and other Puerto Rican revolutionaries to abolish slavery and to overthrow Spanish colonial power in Puerto Rico. And so this is an important day in our historical memory. And so we were grounded not only in the spirit of our ancestors, the spirit of Lares, okay, the rich tapestry of our revolutionary heritage, okay, but also rooted in a profound indebtedness to the sacrifices and the achievements of the Palestinian resistance, okay, our unwavering commitment to accept the historic responsibility that is before us, okay, to struggle by all available means for the liberation of our beloved homeland and the defeat of our common enemy. So this really informed a lot of our thinking and a lot of our actions while we were down there. For us, Filiberto represents not only militancy in its most dignified expression, the power that we possess to militarily confront the behemoth of Yankee imperialism on our terms, but also the imperative of principled strategic national unity, okay? The unity of all sectors of our independence movement, the mobilization of the totality of our people, using each and every muscle within our collective body to free the land to which we belong. This was the project to which Filiberto was committed to his dying breath. Okay, and we discussed this. During our time on the archipelago, we engaged in collective reading and internalization of Filiberto's words, situating our national struggle within the broader hemispheric struggle against the impositions of Euro-American savagery and abuse, a savagery which persists in occupied Palestine, in occupied Haiti, in occupied Congo, in occupied Korea, and in occupied Puerto Rico. So we hold deeply within us Filiberto's contention, which echoes our fierce, okay, and honorable sister and comrade, Haunani K. Trask, whose life was dedicated to the liberation of occupied Hawaii, that we are not Americans. We are not Americans. And so as we dug our feet into Puerto Rican soil for this brigade, and we submerged ourselves in the waters of its rivers, in the cool breeze of its mountains, we remembered this, that we will die as Puerto Ricans, on our feet, as our Comandante Filiberto did. That is the example that he provided to us. An example which cannot, by any means, be extinguished. And so it is that spirit which we carry with us as we have returned, and which we hope to transmit as far and as widely as possible. So before we begin in earnest, we also wanted to include this excerpt from a piece of Filiberto's writings translated by our members. And this is a passage which remains relevant for us today as we continue to struggle and our people continue to struggle against the psychological barriers to independence. Okay, if we could have somebody raise their hand to read this passage, we would appreciate it. Anybody at all, don't be shy. Go ahead, August. Thank you.
The constant terror executed through repressive policies whose purposes have been to hinder and eliminate any liberation tendency of our nation and true social justice has been a constant from the very moment they invaded our land until the present. Implementing in the consciousness and subconsciousness of Puerto Ricans the idea that without the Yankees, we would all starve to death is psychological terrorism deliberately planned and executed. Terrorism is instilling fear of being repressed and imprisoned for the mere act of possessing a Puerto Rican flag in your home. Terrorism is uprooting Puerto Ricans from their essence as human beings, from their history, from the brotherhood of those who, like you, share your geographic environment and common history. Filiberto Ojeda Rios.
Thank you so much, comrade. So we begin here on September 23rd, which was not our first day of the brigade, but is being highlighted for its importance. We begin in Lares, okay, mobilizing in the town plaza, saluting our flag, singing our revolutionary anthem, paying respect to all who have served the cause of our nation's independence struggle. And we proceeded through the afternoon, meeting many others who were present to celebrate the history of our resistance, who were present also to uplift the resistance in Palestine, in Cuba, in Venezuela, and elsewhere. And we then proceeded to Hormigueros to march to Filiberto's home, where we gathered with many others to engage in a deeply moving activity, where we gathered in a large circle, singing a repeated refrain and passing a scroll, a very long unfolding scroll with a visual representation of the history of our land and its peoples from before Spanish conquest, throughout the centuries of Spanish rule, into the invasion and occupation by the United States, and all of the profound struggles and manifestations of our exploitation and oppression, which our families and all life on the archipelago have experienced, okay, and have endured for so many years. We slowly pass the scroll, taking in the pain and the triumphs, the obstacles, the victories that we've encountered along the way, until we reach the conclusion with a visual representation of our people prepared to fight for a new day, where the sun might shine on the waters unburdened by what once was, and nourished by our hands shaping what will be. It was incredibly beautiful, incredibly moving. We were so blessed to be there with so many people to share that important moment. You can see on the left, we are gathered in Lares in the town square at the statue of Betanzas. As I said, one of the key planners of the uprising, a key figure, noted as the father of our nation. This event really consecrated the Puerto Rican nation and identity, as distinct from Europe, from Spain, from everything that came before it. And it was not only a struggle for national liberation, okay, and to expel the Spanish, but it was also a class struggle that sought to free all enslaved people, and even all the people who were seen to be free but were indentured, were living under a system of indentured servitude on the archipelago. So this was very much both a national and a class struggle. And we remember Lares every single year. And you can see some of these other photos in the center and on the right of our time in Hormigueros. The home in the background in the center is the home where Filiberto was murdered by the FBI, where he was living at the time that he was found and discovered by the FBI. And they have maintained that home in much the same shape as it was left during his murder, after his murder. And so you can still see a lot of the bullet holes and a lot of the evidence of the extreme violence that was undertaken against somebody who is incredibly important to us as Puerto Ricans. But again, his memory lives on. There's no way to extinguish his contributions to our people. and the presence of his spirit within us today. So with that, I will pass it over to Davina to speak about Esencia.
Thanks, Mateo. Always hard to follow Mateo, but I will try to do it justice. So, I mean, as you heard a little bit about our comrades talking about our trip to Puerto Rico, our goal wasn't just to visit, it was to listen, to learn, to build solidarity with the people on the archipelago. We wanted to understand firsthand how communities are resisting things like environmental justice, how those struggles connect to what we're facing here in the diaspora, and how we can uplift what they're fighting and fight with them. And so one of the most powerful moments was our first day visiting the site where Project Esencia is set to be built. So before I go into that day and how rewarding that day was, I'll talk a little bit about what Esencia is and give context to that as well. And so Esencia is a mega luxury project set to be built in Puerto Rico across 2,000 acres of land. This is in the town of Cabo Rojo in Puerto Rico, and this is backed by venture capitalists, Rubin Brothers, Three Rules Capitals, foreign investors. As you can see to the right, the chairman of the Mandarin Oriental, folks who don't belong to Puerto Rico are trying to build essentially a city within a city. They're calling it an enclave. This city is set to build 900 homes, 5 luxury hotels, 2 golf courses, an artist village, a trauma response center, and 500 dorms across these 2,000 acres of land. And just to give you like even bigger context, Puerto Rico, hospitals are closing in Puerto Rico. On Vieques, they haven't had a working hospital since Hurricane Maria. And so you see how foreign investors and just the people who are supposed to be for Puerto Rico are selling out Puerto Ricans to the highest dollar. And so this will really impact local community in many ways. It'll destroy the already fragile ecosystem that is on the coast of where this project is set to be built. It's going to displace thousands of Puerto Ricans. They say under the guise that it's going to give more jobs and provide more income into the community, but it's not going to feed the community, and it's not going to be invested back into the community. It's going to go right into the pockets of Mandarin Hotel, Rubens Brothers, and it's not going to be, people from Puerto Rico are not going to be the ones living in this little town. It's going to be folks from outside of Puerto Rico. And it's also going to drive up the cost of water, electricity, and food and other essential services that Cabo Rojo already faces and struggles with constantly. So that's just a little bit of context to this really detrimental project. And so it was really important for us to meet with the communities who are organizing to stop this project. There are a few coalitions that are happening. And so that's what we did on our first day. If you want to go to the next slide. Perfect. So we met with Dr. Hector Quintero from the Brigada Solidaria Oeste coalition, which is part of the Defiende Cabo Rojo coalition, which is groups that have come together to stop this project. And so on that first day, we met him, sharp early in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, to talk a little bit about the Esencia project some more. So we were able to walk a little bit on that land, see some of the wetlands that are set to be destroyed if this project does get complete. And if you're not familiar, wetlands are a really important part of any ecosystem, especially an archipelago like Puerto Rico that faces so many storms and hurricanes. These are really, really there to help also protect those kind of floodings. We talked with Hector about the project, about the dangerous impacts that this is going to have on the land and on the people in Cabo Rojo. The region already faces massive water and electrical issues. There are weekends where they have no water, where they have to drive out to get water. And so if this project goes through, you can bet that this is just going to deplete their water table and exacerbate those issues even more. So again, we talked a lot about what I said in the last slide with Hector, and we talked, and he just brought awareness to us a little bit more about just some of the more extreme impacts that this is going to have. But I think that when it comes to power of the people, Hector really showed us how important that is, because something that this coalition does really well is going door to door and knocking on people's homes and letting them know that this is happening in their community and making them aware of the issue. He told us that they've canvassed over 60 to 7% of Cabo Rojo, trying to create awareness around this project. And that really gives you like just that understanding of that grassroots work that really does work, and it really gets to the people, and I really just loved hearing that. Like the old school knocking on doors, canvassing, is how they get the word out to the people. So they'll be meeting. They also, Hector talked with us also about how they'll be doing an assembly for the people that just happened actually. So we should definitely get an update, but they were gonna announce some top secret findings that they discovered, hopefully in support of getting this project shut down. But again, this is an assembly to inform the people on what's happening, to make them aware of the things that are happening in their community. And so for us, it's a reminder that the fight for even environmental justice when it comes to imperial colonialism isn't it just about one community? It's about the global struggle against exploitation, privatization, and imperialism. These same forces gentrifying our neighborhoods in New York, or I'm in New York, so that's why I use New York, or in Florida, or in other parts of the US, are those same groups that are displacing families in Cabo Rojo, in parts of Puerto Rico. And so it's really important that we're connecting those issues as well. And I felt like that was really happened during that brigade. And so we left that day not feeling just inspired, but committed to keep fighting against Essencia and ensuring that this project doesn't go through. And so if you go to the next slide, there are definitely some ways to, these are some pictures first before I get to it. This is just a group picture of us in the middle. On the far right, we went on Hector took us on a really long trail that essentially was walking through the project site. We got to see some really interesting creatures and talk a little bit more about the project. And then we ended with a huge, like maybe 20 barriles were there, bombazo that was for no Essencia. So it was really nice to end the day there at the bombazo, being in community with the people. And so yes, thank you. And so we are fighting, DPC is fighting against Essencia, and we won't stop until they're out of Puerto Rico and this project is, you know, what is it? Red lighted. They say green light to start a project. We're going to ensure that this is red light. But so we're doing we have a national campaign that we've been developing. It's still in the earliest stages of being planning, but that hasn't stopped us from getting part of it, doing our work. We've been doing rallies. We've been showing up at Mandarin Hotel. We showed up at Mandarin Hotel and did a sit-in and gave out flyers to the people and made them aware of what these people are investing in, these foreign entities, not even belonging to Puerto Rico. And so we're going to continue to put the pressure on the investors, the architects, the architects are also Puerto Rican based. So like that even is really makes us very angry. But even calling out these architects, even if they're Puerto Rican, calling them out and letting them know how they're impacting their community, we're going to keep doing that. So we're going to keep showing up until it's defeated. There are some ways you can support. You can follow several of the coalitions that are doing this work in Puerto Rico. We have a couple of articles that you can read about Essencia. and what will happen to Puerto Rico if this is constructed. You can sign the petition, and then just follow us as we continue to mobilize and launch this campaign. But this was a magical day to just learn more about this project and hear about how we as people in the diaspora can really fight this injustice. So yeah, I'll pass it to the next comrade who is talking about our teachers union.
Yeah, thanks, Davina, for that amazing overpass on Esencia and all the things that we learned in Cabo Rojo. Hey, everyone, my name is Daniel Pizarro. I use they, them, your pronouns. I am a part of DPC in Atlanta. And I'm here to talk to y'all today about the Federación de Maestros de Puerto Rico, FMPR, which I believe was either the third or fourth day of our brigade. But it started off with us traveling to San Juan from Orocovis, and where we went with Vice President Miguel Rivera to kind of discuss a little bit of the challenges that the teachers have been facing, not just recently in Puerto Rico, but what was really interesting about this was we were able to see an organization that has been in existence for about almost 60 years now, kind of talk about the challenges that they have been facing and the iterations of the work that they have been going through. And I think that it is important to kind of derive lessons from that trajectory because, you know, as Boricuas in the diaspora, part of a lineage of revolution and fighting for our independence, it is super important to learn from other organizers from different sectors, from, different movements to understand how times, either through like federal policies, colonial policies, tax exemptions, things like that, impact the work in different forms. So it was really, really interesting to hear the perspective from Teachers Union. But just a little bit of background on the Teachers Union. Just, talking about some of the primary history challenges, talking about mass privatization in Puerto Rico. Most of the conversation kind of talked about neoliberalist policies as it pertains to education. And I think right now too, now we're seeing the degradation of the Department of Education, which, it's still independence for Puerto Rico, but that still has an impact on the archipelago. And so it is important to kind of see how, different policies are being enacted and affecting people, on the archipelago. But the Federation was formed in 1966, and this month marks around 59 years since its founding. But despite, the history of fighting for their rights as workers, they still have a long road ahead of them. And we in the diaspora have to figure out what ways that we can show up to support the teachers union. Next slide, please. So the strongest union busting tactics. So there's two that we kind of found to be the overarching themes with the impacts to education and teachers union. But the first one really being the defunding of public schools, which has a severe impact to students, teachers, and parents alike. There are already not that many public schools in operation in Puerto Rico. And so as more schools are either being defunded or being closed down, especially the students in more rural areas of the archipelago are having to go even further out and take, longer routes to get an education to go to school. In some instances, a lot of folks are also going into either homeschooling or not getting the proper education that they can because there is no infrastructure to support, transportation to such far away places. Far for folks that are on the archipelago. As well as, very few teachers are actually hired at public schools because the schools do not have money to hire more. Additionally, any teachers that are hired are paid extremely low wages and at one point have extremely large class sizes. And that has been like a overarching fight that a lot of the teachers have been going through since the foundation of this federation. Teachers historically have already been underfunded, overworked, but in Puerto Rico, there is a clear distinction in history of underfunding of public servants, particularly as it pertains to teachers. And then the last point here being the lack of funding degrades public schools both physically and administratively, leaving them unable to keep buildings maintained or having any kind of accommodations for disabled students or those that need special education. As they're defunding it, there's less, money being put into repairs for schools and school infrastructure. And so it makes it really hard for students to, when the power goes out, for there to be AC to, you know, feel cool and be able to pay attention to the lessons that are being learned, or to even have like basic accommodations for students with different abilities, cognitive abilities. And all of this is a mechanism for parents to feel like the public school system is failing their students and them, and forcing them to either make the choice to either go to that public school or figuring out whether or not that they can go to charter schools. Next slide, please. So then the second theme that we kind of talked about was mass privatization. So the US installed the government of Puerto Rico has created a voucher system that incentivizes parents to send their children to private charter schools. These charter schools are privately funded. They have better conditions than public schools, like properly maintained buildings with air conditioning and more teachers. Basically trying to sell the solution being more private funding towards charter schools and less support or even attention directed towards public schools, all as a way to like make it seem that the issue is public schools as a whole uh rather than, you know, the government of Puerto Rico really making a conscious decision and choice to defunct public education on the archipelago. And because of these vouchers, students are expected to always maintain maintain a certain GPA at all times, or face consequences for either being expelled from the school and having to find other means of getting an education. These schools are also not accessible and do not offer many disability accommodations or special education that a lot of folks in Puerto Rico do need. And then additionally, these private institutions do not hire union teachers, but provide better working conditions, but not by much, as well as they do offer a little bit of better pay than public schools. But again, it's still not by much. And it's a way to incentivize teachers to not join the union just to be able to have a job. So these two tactics are the main ways to kind of chip away at the collective power that the teachers union has been building for decades. Recently in 2022, they went on I forget how long the strike was, but they went on a long strike in order to fight for better wages and conditions for the teachers in Puerto Rico. They were able to, and I'll talk a little bit this more in terms of how some of the wages, but recently in 2022, I believe they were still only making 2,100 a month, which is still way below poverty line. It's still not much to afford, especially as the conditions on the island are worsening, inflation increases, bills are increasing, groceries are super expensive. Like, it's just not affordable. But some of the solutions and victories that we discussed in our meeting were that, you know, the Federation has been able to secure many victories throughout the history. For example, in 1974, they organized their first ever strike, which lasted 2 months. It was one of the biggest successes, and they had won 2 months of pay over the summer, which was previously only a month of pay. Another one of them was in 2008. They initiated their second strike, which went on for about 10 days. Afterwards, they won $250 a month raise, making the new average monthly about $1,700 per month, as opposed to the previous $1,500 per month, which again is not a super big raise as you see the cost of inflation rising, especially in 2008, right during the recession, 2008 recession. So a $250 raise during that time was not adding much. Um, Currently, the strategy of the Federation has been to try and involve itself in the community. They've mentioned that they have been doing an asamblea strategy in which the asamblea is people movement assemblies where they're going in different localities and speaking to the parents, the teachers, and the students as to the realities of what's going on in publication on the archipelago and figuring out ways to, you know, challenge what's been going on. And then lastly, they've also attempted to organize the youth, but a lot of the progress that they made with students, especially in education program, has been thwarted just because as folks go into the program and then, you know, start getting activated or being brought into movement, after those 4 years or so, those folks graduate, and then all of a sudden they have to recreate the infrastructure for students to be able to support the movement. So it's not super sustainable in a way that is generative for new incoming students or graduate students, or students who have graduated from the program, to continue on this work at the university level. Yeah, that's all the reflections that I had, and I will pass it off to Lorena.
Thank you, Daniel. Lorena, she, her. I'm with the DMV chapter. I'm going to be speaking on the Comuna Caribe. We met with Comuna Caribe our 4th day on the island with Isla, who's the founder of Comuna Caribe. This is an organization that is in solidarity with Latin America and the Caribbean. It was created specifically to support our Haitian siblings who, have been facing so much, and as immigrants in Dominican Republic are faced with politics of xenophobia and anti-Blackness. Comuna is part of a broader fight for reparations and liberation from the historical, social, economic, and ecological debt imposed on the global South by the capitalist colonial class. And today, not only is it in solidarity with our Haitian siblings, but also responds to the attacks that are facing our Dominican and other siblings on the island, who are there seeking refuge. But obviously the same sort of US politics that we're facing here, in terms of just ICE raids and the militarization that we're seeing in our cities, is the same thing that Puerto Rico is facing. Isla talked a lot about how they coordinate with other organizations to be able to provide shelter, food, safety, and other forms of assistance for migrant communities. They get really creative about how they spread their Know Your Rights resources. They use speakers and they go throughout neighborhoods to do this work. And this is work that they've done prior to the sort of escalation of ICE that we're seeing in this administration. This was done during the Obama and Biden. We know that didn't start with the Trump administration. So this commitment is something that they've held for a long time, and they are working with communities and in communities to make sure that ICE stays off Puerto Rican streets. Some highlights that we took away, some quotes in the bottom. Immigrants are the most vulnerabilized, and if we don't push back against these immigration policies, they will just go up the ladder, attacking other oppressed communities. Puerto Rico is a country of immigrants. That includes those pushed out, and that's really important to recognize the forced migration that Puerto Ricans have experienced. She also spoke to Puerto Rico as what we see in Puerto Rico as a civil genocide, as a population replacement, trying to create a Puerto Rico without Puerto Ricans, as we're seeing the sort of, with Esencia, that's so many ways in which trying to incentivize just the capitalists and other people that do not belong in Puerto Rico to make it a sort of paradise for those individuals. And then our Caribbean people have a long history of connection to spirituality, and its spirituality is a source of resistance. So talking about how the Haitian Revolution, it could not have happened without Budum. And in that same way, that's something that they really center in a lot of the work of healing that they do for immigrant communities and other leaders within the movement. They are a movement space, so they are a safe space for the LGBTQIA plus community and others to use their space. And they have altars all throughout the space to really just be a source of healing and to also uplift, our martyrs. I know that they had I think it's El Che, like a whole altar for him. Yeah. And I'll pass it on. I think this is Kike.
Ooh, before we pass it on to our member Kike, thank you so much so far to Mateo, Davina, Daniel, and Lorena for presenting on some of our highlights. Before we move on, I just want to remind y'all, if y'all have any questions or any comments, you're more than welcome to ask as we are presenting, raising your hand, so on and so forth. So if anyone has anything they would like to share or ask, we can do so now, or you can continue through the presentation. Yeah, don't be shy, we're not. Okay, that's okay. We're still processing, we're still reflecting. So I'm gonna go ahead and pass it on over to Kike to share on the next activity.
Thank you, Giselle. Hi, everyone. I'm Kike, he, him pronouns. And I get to share two of the last places that we want to highlight. So most of what's been covered so far were a lot of the active organizers and folks on the ground doing a lot of the incredible work right now in Puerto Rico. But another side to it that was really fun, and for me who loves to be in a library and digging in archives, was thinking about museums and different places that were honoring and preserving our history. The remembering the shoulders of the giants that we stand on in our fight for the liberation of Puerto Rico. So we got to visit the El Museo de Nuestros Mártires, the Museum of Our Martyrs, and it was a really powerful experience and striking how personal and intimate the space felt. It was founded by Ernesto Davila, who transformed his own home into a museum dedicated to preserving Puerto Rican nationalist history. And what was special about it wasn't just a collection of artifacts. It was a place where memory and resistance was coming together, and it felt like a living and breathing space because a lot of artists and people still contribute to the space. The museum highlights key figures and movements in the independence movement. There's a section honoring the Cerro Maravilla martyrs, Carlos Sotiarivi and Arnaldo Dario Rosaro. There's a mural of Filiberto Ojeda Rios. There's portraits of leaders like Pedro Albizu Campos and Juan Antonio Corter. And they all offer a glimpse into the people who shaped Puerto Rico's struggle for sovereignty. There's another powerful exhibit commemorating the 1954 nationalist attack on the US Congress. And beyond these individual stories, the museum preserves the memory of pivotal moments like the nationalist insurrection of October 30th, 1950, and the Grito de Lares, reminding visitors of the long ongoing fight for independence. What stood out to me most was how, oh, and yeah, you could actually go to the next slide. I wanted to add, I just added a few extra photos because I wanted everyone to get a taste of what it was like being in the museum with us. And these were just some of the photos art that was hanging on the wall. The center map was something that was really powerful, highlighting in the first insurrection that was led by Ramon Betances, and it shows a map highlighting different places in Puerto Rico where people were organizing together across the island. And I think what was so special about it is you can go into the museum at any point and keep on discovering something new. And it was intimate, it was personal, it was private, but it was also really special that we got to do it collectively with our whole brigade. In the photo on the left side with Albizu Campos surrounded by all his comrades, and yes, they are all male. However, it was still a beautiful slice of history that was being captured there. But yeah, visiting the museum felt like stepping into a space where personal dedication keeps these histories alive and relevant today, and it was a very humbling space. So much so that after we visited the museum, we didn't learn this until later on, we found out that Ernesto was the nephew of Heriberto Marin Torres, who was one of the three survivors of the 1950 nationalist insurrection. So it was quite telling that that this lineage, this connection to fighting for Puerto Rico's independence, was being carried on by someone connected in the family and trying to preserve the history. And if we can go to the next slide, I'll share another museum that we got the opportunity to visit. Oh, and here's some more photos also. There's a mural there, Viva la República, which is a inspired by the Ponce massacre, where an independence leader had inscribed that on a wall in their blood. And then there is a cast of Pedro Albizu Campos underneath the glass case. That was one of the last cast that captures what his face and likeness look like months before he passed away. The other museum that we got to visit was the Casa Museo Blanca Canales, which offered a unique glimpse into the life of one of Puerto Rico's most remarkable women. Blanca Canales was an educator, a social worker, a nationalist leader, and inspired by Pedro Albizu Campos. She organized women through Las Hijas de la Libertad, helping to mobilize women in the struggle for independence. And her most famous act, or notable act, came on October 30th, 1950, when she led the Jayuya uprising, raising the Puerto Rican flag, and became the only woman in Puerto Rico history to proclaim the Republic of Puerto Rico under US colonial rule. For this, as a result, she was sentenced to life in prison, serving 17 years before her release in 1967. Remarkably, she never renounced her convictions and remained steadfast in the cause for independence. The museum, restored in 1994, preserves not just her political history, but her personal story. Visitors can see the original independence flag, Blanca's personal items, and even the gun and bullets she carried. The museum highlights her family as well, including her father Rosario, Jayuya's first mayor, and her brothers Nemesio and Mario Canales. Nemesio was a prominent author at the time. Walking through the house, you see how the personal and political were intertwined in her life. And if you can go on to the next slide, here's a couple of photos. You can see the guns and portrait of her and the exterior of her house. The museum emphasizes women's leadership and courage, and it felt really powerful to honor a woman leader in the movement for independence, and making sure that we made space for that in a space that can oftentimes focus on the male figures in the movement. And then if you go on to the next slide, I actually added a couple of new photos that I hadn't fully recognized until I was refreshing myself for this presentation today. And one of the photos, so on the far right side is a glass case which had the guns underneath it, and then there was a photo, and I hadn't fully realized it, but this photo in the center is of her when she got to visit the museum 2 years before she had passed away when it first opened. And it just happens to be on the left side of this corner of the room with this same flag, and you could tell the beams in the background. And it was just really powerful and impressive to be in these unique sites and spaces, and preserving these sites and spaces that were really that we need to do everything we can to preserve, and not forget the connections, the lineage, and the history, and always maintain a space for reflection on Puerto Rico's struggle for self-determination.
Thank you so much, Kike.
Thanks, Giselle.
So now that our members have shared our brigade highlights, we like to talk about what some of our takeaways were. So one, with understanding the realities of austerity and repression. So we're hearing directly from workers and others affected by school closures, crumbling infrastructure, privatization, displacement, really made it clear how deeply colonial and capitalist forces impact their daily survival. So it reminds us why the work that we're doing is important, like to stay connected with the lived realities of the people living in Puerto Rico. With the second one, connecting with local organizers. So we connected with organizers on the ground that are actively resisting harmful development projects that threaten land, housing, and our sovereignty. We saw community-led recovery efforts, environmental defense, grassroots education initiatives that show so much creativity and persistence, that people are literally building alternative futures despite the limited resources and the state neglect. It was incredibly powerful to witness the efforts of what the building of a liberated Puerto Rico looks like firsthand. And learning from solidarity work, we're learning from organizations doing solidarity work with immigrants, where they're creating spaces of belonging, safety, and mutual care. That resonates really deeply with us because it echoes our own communities here in the diaspora, like the works that we're doing locally in our chapters. So these experiences have really helped ground our understanding of what liberation looks like in practice, not just as an abstract goal, but as something people are already living and creating in our country, Puerto Rico. So this slide really represents the heart of what we took away from the brigade, that despite colonial conditions and repression, there's incredible strength and vision in the people of Borinquen. If any comrades from DPC would like to add from other lessons learned from the brigade, I would love to invite you all to do so.
I think the other thing I would add was just the importance of internationalism. I think that's something that was shared by both Comuna Caribe, also the Federation of Teachers, of just the way that that is a principle of theirs that they're not willing to sort of, you know, put aside, like let go of, even if there's no funding or if there's political pressure. And so I think that's an important reminder for us in these moments of like that internationalism and solidarity at the international level has to be like front center, and it's not something that we there's a word that's escaping me, but just something that we don't give up on just because we only want to center like ourselves or something else, right? Like it's not something that we don't throw that under the bus for other things.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lorena. We can
One
move
thing
on. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, just very briefly. One thing that really stuck out to me was how much gratitude everyone there had for our being there. And I don't say that to pat ourselves on the back, but to really sort of highlight what can sometimes be fraught relations between peoples who've been separated by imperialism and by capitalism, and especially these cultural processes of Americanization and this feeling of our people who are no longer here. Do they care? Do they see us? Are they still representing us where they are? And you know, when we arrived there and we were telling people that we are here from the United States, there was a real sense of appreciation, a real sense of the power of reuniting our nation, a real sense of you know, gratitude for our commitment to take the lessons from there and to be their voice, you know, in a sort of situation. I don't mean to say that in a way that deprives them of their voice and of their agency to be articulating their own struggle, but colonialism silences people. Okay, it suffocates our people. Okay, and so we need to be the representatives for what we see down there as a militant commitment to continue surviving. And so when we were learning about Esencia, and when we were learning about the teachers union, and when we were meeting with Comuna Caribe, it was very much, you know, a sense of like, take this back to your base, take this back to your city, to your town, you know, stay connected. Like, we are in this together. And it was really, really incredibly powerful to be able to forge those ties and to be able to have a real familial feeling instead of, you know, tension or anything like that. It really communicated to us that we are in this together, and it really reaffirmed this sense of responsibility that we have.
Thank you so much, Mateo. So well said. Thanks, comrade. I believe we can move on to the next slide.
I can jump in here and share this last slide, which resonates with a lot of the lessons that were just shared. And I wonder if there's other words to articulate this sentiment too, but I think just the three succinct words of thinking about diaspora as responsibility, and our the responsibility we have as being a part of diaspora, and that speaks to Lorena's remark about internationalism. And so I'll share this. It felt like a lesson too in the way of how we celebrated and honored our collective histories, learning from the movements currently and individuals who came before us historically, and recognizing that the never stopped heartbeat of our intergenerational struggle for Puerto Rican liberation continues to live on. A key lesson was the necessity for the diaspora. We felt this through the warm feedback from community members who expressed gratitude and pride that we came to learn, witness, and fight alongside them on the ground. Solidarity is something we must continue to nurture here and there as a responsibility to sustain our interconnected struggles, such as housing injustice, displacement, and colonization taking different forms, but sharing the same roots. And that part really felt like one of the deepest lessons that we had in the brigade, and really felt like something that reaffirms the necessity for us to continue to have these brigades, to continue to have these report backs to share with you all, and to also remind each other about the importance and the beauty of our work there. Thank you all.
So this last slide captures a little bit of the heart of our experience, connecting to our land, to the political, and honestly to one another, down to the nourishment that sustained us during the brigade. You can see photos of us, sharing a meal together, preparing some tostones together. A simple reminder of the joy and community that we shared working in Puerto Rico. So in between our scheduled activities, when possible, we would enjoy being in community with our fellow DPC members. Some of the things that we did, we went to the beach where we got bit up by the seasonal microbes. We were checking out breathtaking waterfalls and other nature gem secrets that were shared by people that lived in that community. We were touring the area by foot to sightsee, having our own little dominoes tournament, doing some storytelling, sharing some really good belly laughs. So incredibly grateful for our comrades, for our organization for giving us a political home, and to the people in our country doing the work and leading the way for us. So thank you all so much for sticking with us throughout this presentation on our report back for our brigade in 2025. If you want to connect with us, you can follow us on Instagram if you don't already, Diaspora Pa'lante Collective. Stay connected, join us, go on our next brigade with us, meet us out in Puerto Rico. Let's get to work.
Que viva Puerto Rico libre y socialista.
Siempre.